This this is the Impressions Xchange podcast.
Impressions Xchange podcast,
where all topics impacting the graphic imaging and printing industry are addressed via in-depth news coverage, analysis, and timely interviews.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Impressions Xchange podcast. Today I have 6 Printing United Alliance subject matter experts for our now annual beginning of the year Outlook Roundtable. In the January issue of Printing Impressions, senior editor Tony McQuilkin asked these SMEs to share their outlook and opinions on what to expect in their relevant areas of expertise for the upcoming year. I followed up with them on today's episode. First up, we have Lisa Cross, Principal Analyst of Alliance Insights, sharing trends and information related to AI, automation, and convergence based on recent and upcoming studies from the Alliance. Then we turn the tables over to Andy Paparosi, Chief Economist of the Alliance, to chat about the impact of tariffs in the economy. Adrian Harrison joins us as the Alliance's Vice President of Human Relations Consulting to discuss building up talent pipelines and fostering a positive workplace culture. To discuss the growing importance of sustainability is Sarah Osorio, the Alliance's Environmental Health and Safety, or EHS, Affairs Coordinator. Gary Jones is Vice President of EHS Affairs, and he lets us in on what we need to know in the area of safety and OSHA regulations in 2026. And finally, rounding out the discussion is Steph Buca, Government Affairs Manager, who updates us on postal reform and how the Alliance is responding to issues impacting the USPS. And just a note before we dive in, Printing United Alliance members have exclusive access to insight and guidance from the subject matter experts that were on today's episode. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Ash.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Ashley. This is an opportunity for us to continue our conversation.
So, as many of you will recall, those who are listening, last year we did a follow-up podcast after the Outlook article that was published at the beginning of the year in Printing Impressions. And I wanted to do that again because we had the Outlook article in the January issue of Printing Impressions again this year. And you all shared some really, crucial information for business owners and for print service providers. So I'd like to delve into it a little bit. Lisa, you were first in the article, so I'm going to put you in the hot seat, ask you a few questions about your market trends update that you provided. So, Lisa, something that you mentioned was that AI, automation, and convergence are your top 3 picks for what will have the most impact in 2026. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, Ashley, and thank you so much for putting me in that scorching.
Of course.
So the reason that I picked those 3, I think all of them have impact, but not in isolation. Automation today is driving productivity and helping printers to scale in the face of labor and cost pressure. And on top of that, AI adds intelligence to help, improve estimating, scheduling, decision making, so operations can become more proactive and predictive instead of reactive. When we look at convergence, that's how some of the capabilities are translating into growth. Some of those productivity capabilities are translating into growth and helping to support that movement into convergence. Customers today want fewer partners who can do more across applications and channels, and investments in automation are helping printers to accommodate their customers in those requirements. And since I'm talking about convergence, I would be remiss if I didn't tell our listeners that we have just launched our latest convergence study. This is our 3rd study on convergence. Our first one was actually documenting that it was a phenomenon and it existed. Our second one was on how it's accelerating. And this one is on the benefits that convergence is delivering. When we talk about AI, because that was in my list, AI is a part, of all of those things because it helps to add that layer of intelligence that really helps to connect workflows, make smarter decisions, and really, help organizations, advance what they do for clients and to deliver higher value work. So I think those 3 together really what's going to shape 2026. And one more shameless plug I'd like to make, if you'd indulge me for a second, as
Sure.
we will have another AI study this year. We've done two previous AI research studies, and we'll have a third one that will be launching at Expo this year. And we're also going to have a European version of it if we have any European listeners, and that will be launched around June, July timeframe.
Exciting. Okay. So I will definitely link to the studies that are already out, and I'm looking forward to the ones that are coming up. So let's stick on the AI topic. You pointed out in the outlook that there are some risks in adopting that wait and see approach to AI adoption. So what do you recommend instead?
What we're seeing in our research, and when I say research, we do surveys, and we get a pretty good response across all print market segments, and we do in-depth interviews. And my colleague Andy Paparosi, who's on this call today, participated in those interviews and got some great stuff for this study. And I just needed to call that out because I think those interviews really help to guide what we like to advise people in terms of what they need to do. Well, first I'd have to say that wait and see and standing still is not the way to go, and that's a big risk if you do that because your competitors are not waiting. And with getting started, what we see in the research is that, those leaders, they are, very intentional when they start an AI journey. Most of them start with a low risk approach. They start with practical use cases that can remove pains in their organizations today. They start with these practical use cases. They bring their staff along with them. They encourage them to use AI in their daily work, but they also have guardrails to keep them on track. And because there's a risk with adopting AI, but we find that they start small. They get evangelists. They're not chasing hype. They assign ownership. They set clear goals, and they build confidence through early successes. And we think by doing that, that drives momentum, and that momentum matters because once AI is integrated into workflows and decision making, it might become harder for later adopters to catch up.
Perfect. Lisa, thank you so much. I'm going to move to Andy now. I know, Andy, in your section of the Outlook, you also, talked a little bit about AI and the big data revolution. I don't know if you have anything to add there before I jump in and start asking you about the hot topic of tariffs, but figured I would give you space if you have anything to add there.
No, I would highly recommend that everyone read and think carefully about the AI studies Lisa authored. They're excellent. Mm-hmm. And as Lisa said, you can't wait on investing in AI, or at least learning about AI, understanding it. And one of the things that I'm finding is most significant is what's called the AI-powered predictive analysis. And this is revolutionizing how businesses of all types evaluate what's happening, what's likely ahead, and how to make it an opportunity rather than a threat. It's, as someone who's been in forecasting for 40 years, I've never seen anything like this. And it's something that, again, you don't have to rush into, but you certainly have to begin learning about, thinking about, and we will have an extensive section on it in this year's State of the Industry report. AI-powered predictive analytics. And again, make sure you're reading the studies that Lisa authored. They're excellent.
Great. Agreed. Absolutely. And as I said, I will definitely link to them for everyone listening because they're so valuable. So moving to tariffs, Andy, you noted that tariffs were one of the biggest trends last year and that they've squeezed margins for many companies. So right. What are you seeing? How are leading printers or print service providers responding to these tariffs?
Right. Well, that's exactly right, Ashley. And the problem was the uncertainty. I mean, if you know the tariff on a product is going to be 100%, you adjust to it. But it's very difficult to adjust to policies that border on the random. It was this yesterday, It's this today. Who knows what it's going to be tomorrow? That was the problem, the uncertainty the policies created. And during periods of extreme uncertainty, the tendency is to sit tight and wait for clarity. And what the leaders are doing is exactly what Lisa just said. They're moving ahead with their investment plans, with their priorities, with their workforce development plans. They're not waiting for the economy to improve. They're not waiting for more clarity on tariffs. They're not rushing into anything. They're doing extensive, rigorous due diligence. They're thinking about how to manage risk. They're thinking about how best to capitalize on opportunities, but they're thinking and they're moving ahead. And again, they're not waiting because, as Lisa indicated, in our industry, when you wait, you risk falling behind. And one of the things the leaders are doing is, of course, they're considering the cost of investing, as we always do, but the leaders are also considering the cost of not investing. What if I don't make this investment in AI or workforce development or whatever it is? What are my risks of falling behind and not being able to catch up?
Thank you. Yeah, those are really great points. And you kind of mentioned this. My next question, it plays into that. So the risks of delaying. And maybe if you could elaborate on that and the gap between those industry leaders and the laggards and kind of how that will widen as they delay investment.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. You're absolutely right. In 2026, one of the things that will happen is the gap between the industry leaders and everyone else will widen because the leaders will make the kind of investments that will help them excel, not just in 2026, but far beyond. They'll make the investments in sort of timeless sources of competitive advantage. And they'll also do one of the other things I've found that leaders are doing that I thought was very interesting is they're paying attention to the basics. Yes, they're learning about AI. They're learning about new technologies. They're learning about all the new things happening in our industry, but they are also paying attention to sort of timeless prerequisites for success in any business environment, focusing on core services, on execution, on cash flow, on effective marketing. And I thought that was very interesting. When we talked to the leaders in state of the industry research, again, they talked about all the things they're doing, all the exciting new things they're doing, but they also emphasized that none of that is at the expense of focusing on, again, those timeless business fundamentals that are the source of sustained profitability in absolutely any business environment. And they're finding that balance between focusing on the exciting new opportunities, but also paying attention to, again, these kinds of absolute core business fundamentals.
Right. Right. Well, thank you, Andy, so much for elaborating on that.
You're welcome.
Going to move to the human aspect of this with Adrian. So something that you mentioned in your portion of the article was that you encourage print service providers to expand their talent pool, even if there isn't an immediate payoff, which I think is a really great point. But could you talk about maybe why it's important for printers to invest in talent pipelines, even when there's no immediate hiring needs?
Yeah, I'd like to just rewind everything Andy just said and play that as my response because it could not be more perfect. It's just a good business practice. You have to plan for the future. You do not want to be left behind and scrambling. It's absolutely imperative that you set up these systems, whether there is a great access to candidates right now or not. The ability to have consistency as you look for workers is really, really important. And I think it's not something that you do overnight. It's not something that, you decide on Monday that you want to create a pipeline and by Friday the pipeline is, underway or in place. It takes time. So it's all really, really important is just to as Andy said, a core business practice to do that. And also going to what Lisa had said about automation. Look, the birth rate is declining and it's not going to increase in any substantial way. It's declined every year since 2008, I believe, except for the year of the lock-in, and then after that, we have a declining immigrant population. Fewer people are going to come here, documented, to want to work, and that's already playing out. And so it's really seen initially now in agriculture and hospitality, but it won't be long before we see it significantly in manufacturing at this rate. So it's really important that you create pipelines so that you can have a buffer to these sort of societal trends.
Right. And speaking about some of the changes that we've been seeing over the past year or so, obviously we're a year now into this new administration, and different, policies have come up or different things that we have to consider. And, that might change again in a year or a few years, but can you talk maybe about some practical steps that companies can take now to reduce legal risk when it comes to the different, changing policies while still fostering a positive workplace culture?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to say, and people laugh when I do this, but this is not legal advice. So I am not advising you as an attorney. This is not legal advice. This is advice from somebody who, watches what's happening and is trying to help you ford these narrow streams of what's okay. DEI, as we know, has literally on the first day of the new administration, an executive order went out that said it's illegal, basically. It was verbally, the president said it was illegal and it was disapproved in the executive order. As a result of that, there's a very loud clamor when companies disabled or took down their DEI programs. The reality is DEI can exist without calling it DEI, and it really is on the front end of the hiring process, expanding your pool of candidates, expanding where you seek candidates, expanding your relationships with communities who are not represented fully in the workforce will help diversify your workforce. As far as equity and inclusion, just be nice to people. So that's part of the culture, right? What we want to do is create an environment in our workplaces where people feel comfortable coming forward with ideas that can talk to you about issues and problems that you might see. It does a great job of helping people streamline. Maybe there is a flaw in your workflow that they're going to feel comfortable enough to come forward. So there's all sorts of bottom line business reasons to do it. The number one reason to do it is retention. The number two reason to do it is recruitment. And the number three reason to do it is because you just really want to be able to want to come to work, or when you get to work, not dread it, right? You want to like your job and like the people that you're around. So you want to create an environment that does that. And that will help create equity and inclusion if you do things in a way that makes people feel like they belong and that their input is welcome and invited.
Wonderful. Beautifully said. Thank you so much. So, moving to a slightly different topic here, sustainability aspect of things. Sarah, you in your section, talked about EPR legislation and sustainability knowledge gaps and understanding, material composition and recyclability. But I want to start with asking you about EPR legislation. And how it's changing the way printers need to think about their materials, documentation, and compliance.
First, Ashley, thank you for having me. EPR is evolving very, very quickly. As I mentioned, It's already been passed in 7 states, already introduced in 3 as of right now. So it is evolving quickly. And something that we talk about a lot is the fact that the laws do have some kind of convergence, but they are all a bit different and they all have very different, or not very different requirements, but they all do have slightly different requirements. And EPR is also evolving beyond packaging to also textile EPR. Textile EPR was already passed in California. It's now been introduced to New York and Washington. So we are seeing EPR on a lot of different fronts. When it comes to compliance, documentation, and materials, it's not just going to be about meeting internal goals. It's going to involve supporting your customers and being really a resource for your customers, because nobody knows the substrates, the inks, the coatings, the materials that actually go into a printed product better than the printer. So really being that resource for your customer is going to be really, really important. When it comes to documentation and compliance, it's no longer something that it's nice to have, and metrics are nice to have. No, you're going to have to produce these documents to your customers, because even though printers are not necessarily affected or impacted, because they're not going to have to report this information themselves, their customers are going to have to report this information. So having that documentation, having verifiable information for your customers is going to be really, really important. And that's also because gaps in this documentation can become a huge risk for customers. So ensuring that you're providing documentation that is trusted, that is complete, and that is verifiable is really, really important.
Great, thank you. And I think you mentioned sustainability knowledge gaps in your write-up. So can you talk about maybe what are some of those knowledge gaps that you see most often among print buyers, and how can printers turn that into an opportunity? I know you just mentioned, kind of being the resource for your customers, but could you elaborate?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of different knowledge gaps that come from customers and even printers themselves. I think the language of sustainability is going to be a very big one. Sustainability has a million different terms, a million different acronyms. People throw them around like they all know what it means. So really getting the language down is really important. I will do a bit of a shameless plug here. We did launch our print and packaging sustainability glossary. So I would encourage all of our members to go please check that out. It is really comprehensive, built for the industry. It's tailored to printing. So I would really recommend that resource. But like I said before, nobody knows the packaging or the substrate or the inks better than you. So becoming the resource that your customers need in the world of EPR and sustainability is really, really important. They are not looking for a yes man. They're not looking for somebody that's just going to print any job and they're going to say yes to everything. They're going to look for a partner that's going to help them avoid risk, that's going to help them make smart decisions, that is going to be a contributor to the process, and not just, we'll print what you want and that's it. Again, providing that strong documentation is going to be really, really important. If you have certifications, supplier infos, LCA data, there's one of those acronyms. So life cycle assessment data, really, really important. A big one that I think a lot of printers don't think about is training your sales team on basic sustainability. Position sustainability support as a value-added service, not just something that you put on a quote. Really makes sustainability a part of your sales team, and educate your sales team on how to really, really embolden sustainability and be an educator. Educate your buyers on simple, clear language. Don't be overwhelming, but just be that resource. Buyers are looking for guidance. They're confused. All the states have different regulations and requirements. So if you're a printer that's going to step up to the plate, be a knowledgeable partner, you're going to win those relationships. They're going to have more trust, and that's eventually going to lead to more business.
Right. Really great advice. And I know I spoke with a few PSPs last year that are doing that have like sustainability sheets when they give, a quote to a customer that kind of tell you, like, if you make this decision, you're going to be, saving this much water or whatever the, kind of savings are for the environment and sustainability related to the job quote. So things like that, educating the customer, I think totally makes sense. And Really great. And I will link to the study that, or the sheet, the sustainability kind of cheat sheet that you mentioned. For
I can
everyone.
actually get to that real quick. That sheet that you mentioned, I think it's actually a great idea for anybody to look into, because sometimes when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions, they talk about metric tons. Well, what is a metric ton? Or when you're talking about water, millions of gallons of water, that's hard to picture. But when you tell your customer, hey, you're saving X amount of swimming pools and water, those kinds of things can make a huge difference. And I'll go back really quick to having documentation that is verifiable. Looking into sustainability certifications, third-party certifications like the Sustainable Green Printing Partnership, that's going to add another layer of validation, because it's not just, hey, I'm sustainable and you're saving all this water, but hey, I have this third-party certification, I get audited, like that has an extra layer of backup. So really starting to consider different third-party certifications is another big advice that I would give to print service providers.
Printing United Alliance is the leading member-based printing and graphic arts association in North America, with over 70 years of history and more than 20,000 members worldwide. We're here to support printing professionals like you with the tools, resources, and information you need to grow your business, sharpen your skills, and expand your network. Whether you're a printer, supplier, student, or educator, we've built our community to serve everyone who's passionate about the future of print. An Alliance membership is a smart, cost-effective way to stay current on the latest trends, connect with industry leaders, and give your business the competitive edge it deserves. Head over to printing.org/membership to learn more about the memberships we offer. Let's move the printing industry forward together.
So moving to Gary. Hello, Gary. So safety. I want to talk about specifically OSHA's shift toward deregulation, which is something that you mentioned in your outlook for the year. So how will OSHA's shift toward deregulation and cooperation change how PSPs approach compliance in 2026?
Oh, sure, Ashley. Thanks for having me on again. As I said, this is great to continue our conversation. I wanted to pick up on one theme though before we move on to OSHA, what Sarah was discussing on extended producer responsibility. I know just to reemphasize a couple points that she made. Part of the extended producer responsibility requirements that we're seeing include bans on certain chemicals. So Sarah's been spending a lot of time monitoring those bans on chemicals, like, for example, carbon black or PFAS, which you can find PFAS in certain materials. So EPR isn't just necessarily trying to address packaging and printed paper. There's also several of the states have included legislation to try to eliminate the use of certain chemicals. And we've been very active and very engaged in rolling back the carbon black ban, because basically that means black printing ink is not, you can't use it to print on any covered product. And so we've spent a lot of time and resources. Sarah's really leading that charge in terms of our focus. So just wanted to highlight that too to the industry in terms of what we're doing. Turning our attention to OSHA, I had the opportunity about 2 weeks ago to sit in on a meeting where David Keeling, the new assistant administrator for OSHA, gave a presentation, and I made some notes, and I thought that would be really good to help kick off this discussion on the safety side. I think first and foremost, what was interesting is that his very first comment he made, and the group I was in was a small business. It was for small businesses. It was the Small Business Roundtable. And he said, first and foremost, OSHA is an enforcement agency and remains an enforcement agency. So right off the bat, he made that statement, which I think kind of it needs to weigh on folks in terms of where OSHA is coming from. However, he then went on to say that he wants to change the relationship between OSHA and small business. It's a very adversarial relationship. His background, he came from business. He was safety director at several companies, Amazon, I think, UPS. And so he understands and appreciates, the industry side of OSHA. So with that background, he wants to, what I got from the conversation, we didn't get a chance to ask too many questions, but what I got from a short conversation is he wants to look at how he can change inspections. And so he always asked the question of his staff, if they were inspected by OSHA, what did we learn? What was our takeaway from that inspection? And a lot of times the staff would be like, well, we passed, we didn't have any problems or whatever. And so what I gathered from that, again, reading between the lines a little bit, is that while inspectors may be out enforcing the regulations, I think they're also going to take an opportunity to perhaps educate, especially small business, about other obligations and not necessarily be as heavy-handed as they have in the past. So I think it's refreshing in terms of where I think David Keeling wants to move OSHA. He's also started what's called the Safety Champions program, which we're looking into, and it's basically designed. It's like the voluntary protection program, but the voluntary protection program OSHA has is very resource intensive. It's usually limited to very large companies that have, dedicated safety staff, et cetera. This is really designed for like smaller businesses to work their way through OSHA's. OSHA has a series of steps that they believe should be in a safe and in a robust safety program, and it walks you through those and guides you through that process. So I think that's interesting too in terms of the direction where OSHA is going. But I think in terms of what's the information or what's the takeaway for the industry, I think his first statement is that we're an enforcement agency. I think people need to understand that OSHA is still going to enforce the regulations. Now, how they do that, I think, is going to be interesting because, again, one of the things that David Keeling had mentioned in his congressional hearing is he wants to be data driven. So he wants to focus on those workplaces that have the highest injury and illness rates. And so I think it's paramount for companies to make sure that they stay diligent in their safety program, stay diligent with their OSHA compliance, because OSHA isn't going to disappear. It's going to be there, and obviously we need to make sure that we're educating our members about what they need to do with respect for OSHA compliance.
Right. Okay, and you did mention that you mentioned some safety programs. So maybe let's talk about that. So what are some core safety programs that every PSP should review or strengthen this year? Some things they should be doing?
I think first and foremost, and we'll get into the details, but first and foremost, probably the most important obligation that they can't overlook is that they have a reporting requirement due every March 2nd. So if you have more than 20 employees, every March 2nd, you have to go into OSHA's website and report the number of recordable injuries and illnesses that you had in the previous year. Even if you had zero, you need to report. So a lot of people think, I didn't have any, so I don't have to report. So even if it's zero, you need to report that, because that's the data that they're going to be using to target workplaces. And as part of their overall approach to that is they're going to randomly inspect facilities that have reported, a lower number, because they want to make sure that people are reporting accurately. But if you don't report, we've had members that have been fined because they haven't reported. So you absolutely have to report. I think in terms of the core safety programs from both OSHA, an OSHA and personnel perspective, I always like to look at the OSHA top 10, and we just put out our OSHA top 10 for 2025, and that's always a good roadmap, so to speak, in terms of where you want to focus. And typically, what happens with the OSHA top 10, they generally, for our industry, they generally don't change much. There is a little shifting that occurs. But in our top 10, hazard communication, that's always usually number one or number two. That's chemical safety. And that's basically training employees on chemical safety, having safety data sheets, having a written program. And then the other two that are always in there, which to me should rise, not that HAZCOM chemical safety is important, but it's lockout, tagout, and machine guarding. So lockout, tagout, and machine guarding actually go hand in glove. And those are the two programs that are designed to protect employees from machine hazards, from working with equipment, operating equipment, doing maintenance on equipment. And the two are complementary to each other. And we have historically have had issues with lockout, tagout, machine guarding in our industry. And can delve into that if we have more time. But we have a lot of older equipment that was built for a long period of time. They didn't come with machine guards, and there's no grandfathering for older equipment. And so having safe equipment procedures is critically important, and making sure people follow them. Because again, as I hate to say this, we're still considered high hazard industry for amputations. Mm-hmm. And so we get between each year 40 to 80 amputations that occur in the printing industry. A lot of those can be pointed back to basically machine guarding and lockout tagout. So those are always in our top 5. And what was interesting this year in terms of the top 10, which I look at these every year and study them every year, is powered industrial trucks climbed to number 2. And powered industrial trucks was always hovering around, it was always in the lower, it was like 11 or something. And it jumped to number 2. And basically the powered industrial trucks, that's, forklifts, that's roll clamp trucks and powered pallet jacks. And when I talk with our members about, where do you spend your time on health safety and compliance, I always look at the ones that can cause serious injuries. That's lockout, tagout, machine guarding, and powered industrial trucks. Unfortunately, not just in printing, there's a tremendous number of fatalities that happen with powered industrial trucks for a variety of reasons. And loading docks, believe it or not, loading docks are probably one of the areas that have the greatest number of hazards in a print operation. People don't really normally think of that. They think, immediately they think equipment. But loading docks, you have a lot of material moving. You may have forklifts at the larger facilities, powered pallet jacks. So, you got to do the training, you've got to do the assessments, and it's climbed to number 2, which is really, really surprising to me. So, I think if using that, I would encourage them to go look at our OSHA top 10 that we just published, take a look at that, use that as the guidance to do a critical evaluation of their safety programs and see, where they would need some help. And, just also too, I do want to say is that we revamped our health and safety web pages. And our health and safety web pages, I think, are much better organized than they were. It's easier to find information. We have lots of resources for our members. We have written programs, we have templates, we have checklists, we have some training programs, our iLearning Plus training program. We have some safety training programs. So I would encourage folks to utilize those resources that we have. And of course, we always like to say you have access to Sarah and I. So if you have questions, feel free, reach out to us. We're here to help. We're here to help, people understand what's required, provide information, support, things like that. So.
Perfect. Thank you. And that is shocking that the industrial trucks jumped from 11 to 2. That's a huge jump.
It's huge. Yeah. And I think, I do know that there were a couple fatalities. Unfortunately, they happened in printing. I know there were a couple associated with loading docks. One of them involved a forklift. The other one involved a person being backed over by a truck. But they do happen in printing. And obviously any amputation, any fatality, when you delve into it, they're completely preventable, and so our goal is to try to educate the industry so we get everything down to 0. We want no amputations. We want no fatalities in printing.
Right. Of course, that'd be ideal. Thank you, Gary. So last but certainly not least, I want to dive into postal reform. So Steph, welcome. So
thanks for having me.
Of course. So happy to have you. Welcome back, because we just had you on the podcast recently. So we're going to talk about postal reform, and you had noted in your section that postal reform matters to all printers, not just those focused on direct mail. So can you talk about that a little bit and how postal reform ultimately impacts the industry at large?
Sure. That's a great question. Postal is a key delivery channel for printers. And so it's one of the issues that is on our legislative agenda every year. We are always, interested in this institution, which has been around for 250 years. Unfortunately, it has some financial problems, which everyone knows about. We've seen unprecedented rate hikes, and it also has service performance problems. So mail delivery, not making mail delivery on time. And in fact, the Postmaster General, David Steiner, has come out and said, we think we'll be insolvent by mid 2027. So that's really not good news for us. And here's the thing. Congress helped in 2022 with the Postal Service Reform Act and provided much needed financial aid to the Postal Service. Not this time. They do not have an appetite. There, no taxpayer bailout for the Postal Service. So it's really crucial. And we've been meeting with Postal Caucus members. It's a new caucus that formed to help preserve the institution. And we've been meeting along with our coalition members, Keep Us Posted, and the Coalition for a 21st Century Postal Service. So that's, we're meeting people, and we're, hoping to educate them and serve as a resource and talk to them about a bill that we support. It's called the USPS Serves Us Act. And what that would do is give the Postal Regulatory Commission more authority and oversight over the Postal Service and limit rate hikes, which would definitely help our members and help the industry.
Right. So talking about those rate hikes, what should printers expect this year from upcoming rate increases, and how can they plan for that?
Sure. So July, we do expect another rate increase in July, excuse me. And the best way printers can plan for these rate hikes, the post office does offer special discounts and promotions. And so I would just encourage people to look at what they're offering. If you can take advantage of any of their discounts or promotions, please, that's the best way you can try to lower your costs.
Perfect. Great advice. Thank you so much. So thank you all. I think you've offered really valuable information for the business leaders in the printing industry this year. Is there anything that any of you would like to add? Any advice or something we didn't talk about that you think might be important to touch on?
Can I add just like one summary point, if that's okay?
Of course.
And I just want to say, thank you for letting me be a part of this. I'm happy to participate. And I'm so grateful to be on this panel with my favorite industry subject matter experts. And I learned so much today, as I'm sure our audience does. So to all my colleagues. But just really quick, I just wanted to say from our perspective and the research that we're doing that we think, 2026 is what we would describe as the year of intelligent operations, where automation and data and decision making will be connected more and more, so printers can move faster and waste less and operate more profitably, even in an uncertain market. And also, we think that the next era of print really does belong to companies that think like manufacturers, act like technologists, and act like marketers all at once.
Yeah.
Love that. Yep. Adrienne, of course.
So I also want to add in the Venn diagram of all this information that you've received, at the very center of it is core, important, forward-looking business practices. And I know I mentioned Andy and Lisa when I talked, but after I talked, Gary and Sarah also added things. The workforce now, Gen Z is the primary workforce, cares a lot about sustainability. They want to work for companies who are sustainable. That's part of their decision making. And in the scramble to get employees, it's really important that you walk the walk with sustainability, So that's key. And that is definitely part of that Venn diagram that crosses over into the workforce. Similarly, when Gary talks about us being a high hazard industry, I personally know anecdotes of employees who left one printing company to go to another for more money and then rejected that company, left again, went back to the original company because it had better safety practices and they felt safer in the workplace. So it's really, really important that we help our employees feel safe, that they feel like they're not harming the world, that they're contributing to part of the solution, and that they're helping build a good business. So again, that Venn diagram is really important, and at the core of it is like really good business practices.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes complete sense to me. And I think the, anecdotal, example you just gave, the risk is not, yes, going to a place that pays a little more money sounds nice, but the risk is not worth it if you, your safety is in question. So makes absolute sense. Gary, did you have something to add?
Yeah, you know what? As Adrian made that comment, it really something rang true. I know when we talk about sustainability isn't just materials. It isn't just substrate. A lot of people think, oh, sustainability is substrate. It's really their entire everything we've been discussing here in terms of operation, because sustainability includes the human element. It includes safety. Under the Sarah mentioned the Sustainable Green Printing Partnership. Under the Sustainable Green Printing Partnership, one of the very first things companies have to do to get certified is you have to show that they're in compliance with regulations and OSHA regulations, and they have to make sure that they have fair labor practices. Now, that's pretty straightforward here in the U.S. because of all the labor laws, but still, sustainability isn't just substrate. It's everything that goes on once someone walks through the door of their operation. And so the sustainability is really, we need to keep in mind that it's much broader than just substrates. Not to say that it isn't important. Substrates are very important into sustainability, but it's more encompassing than just that.
Yeah, great point.
And I'll chime in here just at the end. I think a lot of times people see sustainability as a really big undertaking, and it can be very daunting. Like I said, even the language, the acronyms, it is very daunting. But I just hope that people will see sustainability from a lens of opportunity and differentiating yourself from the competition. Just like any big shift, which there is a big sustainability shift that's only going to keep getting bigger. It's going to require investment, it's going to require work, and it's going to require for you to think differently and see things from a different angle. So just really trying to look at sustainability for the really big positives, and not just necessarily a cost center, but doing good for the environment, doing good for your people, but then also doing good for your business, because it's people, planet, profit. Mm-hmm. If you don't have all three, then you're not truly sustainable.
Right. And I think, something that you mentioned is, it's overwhelming with how many aspects of the business come into play. But I think even just making small steps, I think we did an article last year about, small steps that you can take to be more sustainable and, reduce waste. And as Adrian mentioned, attract your workforce. I mean, there's so many different, things that we talked about today that play into it. And so I think that's a good point that you brought up.
And I would just like to add something on the economy. We haven't talked about the economy, and there's actually good news. It's very likely that the economy will strengthen over the next 12 months. And that's good news, because if one thing hasn't changed about our industry, it's our dependence on the economy. But what's different is there was a time in our industry when a rising economic tide lifted all boats. Well, that's changed. We now either prepare for economic recoveries and upturns, or we get left behind. And how do we prepare? We prepare by doing exactly the kinds of things that my colleagues spoke about so eloquently and compellingly today. Nothing can guarantee your participation in the upturn, but the actions they described will greatly increase your chances of participating fully in it.
Thank you. And Steph?
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback off of what Andy just mentioned. When we go to Congress this March for our annual legislative fly-in, that's the message, that print is relevant, it's essential, and it's an economic driver in the United States. So, and I encourage people to visit our advocacy center in the fly-in page. So printing.org, visit the advocacy page, and then flyin.printing.org is the fly-in page.
Perfect. And I will link to those as well in the description. Thank you all so much for speaking with me today and sharing your wisdom. I know I appreciated it. As Lisa said, she learned a lot. I learned a lot today, and I'm sure that our listeners did as well. Thank you. And until next year, I'll probably ask you to do this again.
All right.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, Ashley.
Bye-bye.
I want to thank Lisa, Andy, Adrian, Sarah, Gary, and Steph for joining me on today's episode and sharing their expertise on such a wide range of topics as related to the printing industry. And of course, I want to thank all of you, our listeners. For access to all of the great material covered in today's episode, including research, articles, and links to the SME pages on the Alliance's website, I will include direct links in the description. I will also include information to become a Printing United Alliance member. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Impressions Xchange podcast.